Thank you. Well, it certainly is exciting setting a new boundary for a new school. The level of, I will say, anxiety over selecting the school without fully know the programming and transportation has subsided from what I've seen, and I hope we can capture the lessons learned about how to introduce that to the public in the future. You know, even though boundary setting is new for us as a practice, of course, as you said, it's how we bring students to the facilities. The community input I've heard is that changes are acceptable regarding neighborhoods being reboundaried or staying the same. However, there is a growing concern, like hourly, over the last few days about the drop in student membership, why these levels are agreeable, and if the clerks could please pull up slide 10. I think it's slide 10, yeah. You know, why these levels are agreeable. Residents are seeing, this is the first time residents are seeing the information in this way. And I have to say it reminds me of what happened in the first iteration way back in April when the Fox Mill Elementary School community was proposed to be split in half and separated. And it creates a ton of anxiety. It's the first time that topic's been put out that way, and I really see the same thing happening here. Because up until now, it's been this idea that the new high school will include Centerville, Chantilly, Westfield, and then Oakton and South Lake's a little bit less. And that word balance, I'd like you to speak to what does balance mean? Because when you have a high school going to 72% and another one staying the same, that's not balanced to me. How is that balancing, Dr. Reed?
So I think that, let me find the slide that has the numbers on it. They're all roughly, and Mr. Gordon, I'm going to be calling on you shortly, they're all roughly in the 2,000 range, and 2,000 student range.
Is that slide 13, perhaps?
I'm sorry?
It might be slide 13, perhaps.
Could be. I'm just trying to go through it here. But the balanced means that they were all roughly similar in size, and I do know that I think it is slide 13. I do think that we also tried to, as the consultants worked with the demographics, tried to look at where are most of the growth plans in the county as well. So making sure that we have space. So some of the school areas, for example, Westfield, that's at 2030, may now have space for some academy programs that they didn't previously have space for. And I believe some of the housing plan starts, Mr. Gordon, were in that area. So perhaps you could talk about, it's both balancing for today and balancing in the out years, I think is what you were trying to achieve. Is that correct, Mr. Gordon?
Absolutely, that is correct. And if you look at Westfield, when you were boundarying out, a net total of about 600 students coming out and those coming in, that will also give us the ability to eliminate almost 13 trailers that are at that location as well.
So that's helpful. The challenge for me is that this is my only shot to have a conversation about this proposal. And the public hasn't heard that trailers would be reduced. And the public hasn't heard that academies might be switched. I had a parent today at Westfield say, what if we switch the academies? All great ideas. But Dr. Reed, you and the previous chair and vice chair set us up with 1 week to have a discussion about this with a public hearing in the middle. And that is creating, I have so many questions if I can continue, and by my count, it's 717 from Westfield, not about a net of 600. According to the numbers here, it's 1,062 from Westfield to Skyview, 268 in from Chantilly, and 77 in from Centerville. The boundary policy, and I've said this with the comprehensive as well, 4 pillars. Access to programming is the #1. So how can we say that reducing a school population by 25% is going to keep good access to programming? That does not meet. And I'd like acknowledgement that this is true. If you're going to reduce that, we know what happens when membership drops. The funding drops, the teacher staff drops, the number of options. We have not talked about that. I'll just share the other thing about the boundary policy: enrollment capacity, proximity, and transportation. All I see here is enrollment and capacity, and I would like another go back and possibly grace for a third one, since this is my only chance to ask questions ahead of the vote. Having 2 schools at 100%, 2 at 90%, and 1 at each 83 and 72, that is not balance. There's clearly a disproportionate amount of burden placed on South Lakes and Westfield. Clearly. I want to turn to community feedback. Dr. Reed, you and your staff say repeatedly, including tonight, that your recommendation is informed by the community feedback, as it should be. That's part of the process. Yet I learned yesterday that participation in the Boundary Review Advisory Committee is very inequitable. The attendance data that your staff kept show that for Westfield and South Lakes, they had no representation until the end of May. 4 of the 9 meetings were attended, and that's it. So the whole idea of the committee was to have representation. That's the whole point of this thing. It's unacceptable that that was allowed to happen. Look, parents and staff, they're concerned too, and I don't see clear communications. People like Mr. Moon asked, there's nothing that says this is what it's going to look like year by year. This is what people see, and by the way, this is not a complete picture because it's not showing the current membership. It's not showing the actual children, the people who are going to be impacted. We need the year-by-year projection because it's just too much for people to try and understand what this means. And staff have told me that they do think programming will suffer. So I'll say that from my conversations. This is a big, the following thing is a big finding that I've come to after trying to pore over this data for weeks: the housing projections. We may know that things take a long time in Fairfax County to get done. I've heard from builders and businesses, zoning, planning, it takes a long time. We receive these updates that say, hey, something that got put in 2017, we're still tinkering with what the zoning's going to be. In a recent letter you sent us, there was a potential for almost 30,000 housing units, but no timeline. If I could finish, please, I think this is really important. Is that okay?
Without objection, can we give Ms. Meren an additional minute?
At least, please.
Thank you.
This is a complex thing. Look, the development like this is not happening all over the county. It's happening in Hunter Mill and Sully and a little bit of Providence. Well, not a little bit, it's happening in Providence. There needs to be greater collaboration about what this region is coming into. Now, I asked the supervisor a few weeks ago, can you get me better housing projections? I haven't gotten them yet. But it's not just about Hunter Mill, it's about Sully. There's no crosswalk. Are these projections right? Will there be, I gotta say, I drove by a development in Reston that's supposed to come on market in December. It was a pile of rubble. Now, maybe there's a section that's coming on and maybe that's part of it, but I am trying to reconcile all this information and the projections. And by the way, this doesn't even include the changes from the comprehensive boundary change. And we did actually today get from your office one of the zoning memos that says that it's going to be impacted by the January 22-26 boundary adjustments. I mean, there is so much here. I'm all for not letting the perfect be the enemy of the good, but this is missing so much information and thought. I wonder if the board can think about coming back to this in September with much more information from the superintendent. I don't see how we get these questions answered to make decisions about thousands of people's lives and jobs tonight. Your director of facilities just said that the projection is 2,500 is kind of the goal for a high school. Why then is Oakton High School staying at 2,700 students and 103% capacity?
So we do have other high schools that are over 2,500 as well. So my guess is that there wasn't an ability to make that move. But Mr. Gordon?
Well, I mean, capacity is a double-edged sword, right? So it's student enrollment plus capacity, plus program capacity as well. And we have different sized schools throughout. So different schools based on program capacity can have the ability to accept, a different size students. And 103 is still within our range of 85 to 104.
Excuse me, I understand, and I don't want to use our time. I'm not, again, hearing the level of urgency or craving for accuracy that I think is completely merited. You were talking about decreasing a high school by 25% of the population, and you have a high school that is over by 200 students and 3%. That doesn't even match what's in the CIP. And you expect me to decide where to send people? I also want to say that the housing numbers, and I've said this before, I met with your chief of facilities. I did try to meet with you, Dr. Reed. Our last 2 meetings have been canceled. The housing projection numbers are conflated. Talking about what's zoned, what's pending, those are conflated, which the supervisor confirmed to me, and I don't have those numbers. So what I am wondering is, can we get more precise before we change thousands of people's lives to not create balance, and come back to this perhaps in September, also with the full presentation, including the boundary and the phasing. It's not acceptable that no one is sure what the sibling approach is. It's just not acceptable. This is far too cavalier, and I would like us to consider, I don't know how we do that, but I'd like us to consider waiting a few more weeks, because there's a lot of confusion. There's not a complete plan here. There's not a complete phasing plan. There's not a complete timeline. The housing projection numbers are conflated. It's not balanced. And the access to programming per the boundary policy has not been addressed. So if anybody else would like to speak, I hope you'd chime in. This is a big deal.